It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. The New Orleans attacker, a lone wolf with allegiance to ISIS. Our US correspondent challenges the police chief about security failings.
Do you acknowledge that you let the victims down by not having an appropriate security plan?
Oh, that's not correct. We would disagree with that. We had a
plan that allowed an attacker to drive into a crowd.
And I take exception to that.
A US Army veteran in the real estate business. We investigate what we know about Shamsuddin Jabbar. My best friend and role model, as details emerge about the victims. Sky News hears from the brother of one of those killed in the attack.
Yesterday was the hardest day of my life, and now each day on will be the hardest day of my life. Just living there knowing I can't speak to him ever again.
The man who died in the Las Vegas truck explosion is named as a US Army soldier, but authorities play down a definitive link with the New Orleans attack. Also ahead, warnings of snow and ice to come as we visit communities hit by flooding.
It's time to meet Luke the Nuke!
Plus, we're live at Ali Pali as Luke Littler attempts to power his way into the final of the World Darts Championship. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. The FBI says it now believes the man behind the New Orleans truck attack was not part of a terror cell and instead acted alone after being inspired by the ideology of ISIS. 14 people died after US Army veteran Shamsuddin Jabbar drove a pickup truck into crowds in the popular French quarter of the city. Jabbar was then killed by police. The brother of one of the victims has paid a tearful tribute to his best friend and role model and described the final goodbye to his sibling. Tonight, the New Orleans police chief has rejected a suggestion by our US correspondent James Matthews that victims had been let down by security failings. Here's his report.
Hot gumbo.
Bourbon Street back in business.
Hot jambalaya.
14 flowers remembered 14 victims. So did patrons in prayer. Supporters in town for a college football game did it their way.
Terrorism is not going to stop us from living.
Metal wedges are now on pavements that a terrorist used to steer around temporary barricades. 36 hours on, 36 hours too late. Newly released camera footage shows a fresh angle on the incident as it unfolded, the chaos and the carnage. The FBI's latest assessment is that the attacker Shamsuddin Jabbar acted alone and that there was no connection between the New Orleans attack and an exploding Tesla Cybertruck in Las Vegas. They told how he posted videos to social media on his way to commit murder and spoke of his support for ISIS.
In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote.
They'd worked overnight to clear Bourbon Street, where a terrorist murder ended when he crashed into a crane and was shot dead. Questions persist about the security measures that failed to prevent mass murder. Questions we put to the New Orleans police chief. Madam, do you acknowledge that you let the victims down by not having an appropriate security plan?
Oh, that's not correct. We would disagree with that. We had a
plan that allowed an attacker to drive into a crowd.
And I take exception to that, and I do not agree with that.
It has to be a failure.
We do know that people have lost their lives. But if you're experienced with terrorism, you would not be asking that question.
Well, with respect, experience of terrorism surely requires appropriate security protection. We are learning more about the victims. people who'd come to party in the centre of New Orleans and crossed a terrorist path.
The last thing that we ever said to each other, he told me he loved me, so.
Jack Besh lost his brother Martin, nicknamed Tiger, here on the left. He made a FaceTime call to an emergency room as doctors fought but failed to save his brother.
He couldn't respond to any of us, but he could hear us. I truly believe he could hear us. His eyes were closed and he was on a machine, but I know he could hear us. God kept his heartbeat beating for a reason, and I believe it was so that me and my family could tell him goodbye. You couldn't even fit in the room. There were so many doctors in there. And they said they did everything they possibly could, and he fought so hard. God was calling him home.
It is the iconic street, the old part of New Orleans in the fabled French Quarter. Bourbon Street has the rich associations of this city's past. Its music, its culture, entertainment. Bourbon Street is the best of New Orleans. Here, sadly, they have seen its worst. James Matthews, Sky News, in Bourbon Street, New Orleans.
Well, the attack in New Orleans was a grim reminder that despite Islamic State's numbers being depleted, its ideology lives on and inspired the attacker to kill. Our Security and Defence Editor Deborah Haynes reports now on what we know so far about Shamsuddin Jabbar.
Give me a call. I'm glad to help anytime, and I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Once drumming up business as an estate agent, now suspected of driving terror through New Orleans with an Islamic State flag on his truck. Shot dead at the scene, 42-year-old Shamsuddin Jabbar is the focus of a massive FBI investigation. A US citizen, born and raised in Texas, Jabbar served in the army from 2007, working in HR and IT and deploying to Afghanistan. He became a reservist in 2015 and that same year went to university, complaining in an interview about the challenges of life as a veteran. Discharged from reserve service in 2020, Jabbar presented himself as an estate agent and also worked for the global consultancy Deloitte. He showed an interest in weapons, selling them online and writing in a social media post from 2021, "It's a shoot the guns type of morning." Jabbar had at least 3 prior arrests, all misdemeanors, including theft. He'd also married twice, divorcing in 2012 and 2022, and is thought to have 3 children. Then, in the early hours of New Year's Day, he drove this white rental truck into crowds of pedestrians.
The vehicle is about to go into Bourbon Street.
A security expert points out how Jabbar steered the vehicle around a police car.
Clearly, he probably had done some reconnaissance beforehand.
He says planting an Islamic State flag on the truck was the attacker's way of pledging allegiance to the group.
Well, it's an important reminder for all of us that ISIS hasn't disappeared, it hasn't dissipated. It may not necessarily control swathes of territory in Iraq and Syria like it used to, but it still infects the minds of young, impressionable people around the world.
Turning a vehicle into a weapon is a tactic seen before in attacks linked to Islamic State, such as in London in 2017, as well as in the French city of Nice a year earlier. Security officials across the world, including here in the UK, have long been warning about the persistent danger of Islamic terrorism. Just last October, Ken McCullum, the head of MI5, said the terrorist trend that concerns him most is the worsening threat from Al-Qaeda and in particular from Islamic State. Hunting for clues, the FBI says Jabbar posted 5 videos on social media before launching his rampage, claiming to support Islamic State. Officers for now believe he acted alone, but they'll surely be sifting through his contacts and communications to find out why, and if there's any hidden evidence of direction or even support from the terrorist group. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Well, let's take you to New Orleans and speak to our US correspondent, James Matthews, who's on the ground for us. And James, we have been piecing together from what police are telling you more about the attacker. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, we'll learn more about him today from the FBI, those key points being that they think now that he acted alone and there was no connection to the exploding Tesla Cybertruck in Las Vegas. We learned that he had placed improvised explosive devices in the hours before the 3:15 a.m. attack, 2 devices in coolers. They were pipe bombs, we're led to believe, tied together and designed to be remotely detonated. There's no indication as to whether or not he managed to succeed in doing that, but clearly those pipe bombs did not go off. Many questions, of course, remain, Saima, surrounding security. Take a look at these yellow wedges which have been placed temporarily on the pavements, makeshift wedges on Bourbon Street. They are there because that's the gap, that's the pavement that the attacker used to subvert the makeshift barricades that were in place. So clearly that was a gap that needed plugging. The police, I have to say, haven't delivered a full explanation yet as to why that was not the case. They have issued public reassurance. It's important, clearly, in a city like this, which is a party city. Today there's a Sugar Bowl, a college football showpiece taking place across town. Tens of thousands are in the city. There's the actual Super Bowl next February, and of course ongoing Mardi Gras celebrations. So New Orleans needs to reassure its visitors and its residents that they are safe to go about their business. That's why it was important for them to send out that message and to establish that there were no connections between the attacker here and anybody else who might have malice in mind. So there will be a review of security. We are repeatedly told that by the local authorities. One thing they will be looking at clearly is a permanent solution for security barriers in this street. Security barriers, incidentally, Saima, which were rendered inoperable, and there was a refurbishment of the bollards that had been in place. They weren't working in this Mardi Gras city because they were blocked, and they malfunctioned because Mardi Gras beads, of all things, had dropped into the mechanism.
James, thank you. Well, police there say they're pretty sure the driver of the vehicle, which exploded outside Donald Trump's hotel in Las Vegas, was US serviceman Matthew Lievelsberger. But they can't be 100% certain as his body was burnt beyond recognition. They also say he had a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head before the explosives went off. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner reports from Las Vegas.
Just a few hours after a deadly attack rocked New Orleans, a distinctive Tesla Cybertruck outside Trump International Hotel in Las Vegas. At first without incident, then an explosion and a fireball. The man inside the vehicle was 37-year-old Matthew Lievelsberger, a serving member of the US Army Elite Special Forces, on approved leave at the time of his death. He shot himself in the head immediately before this explosion. In the bed of the truck, dozens of fireworks and gas canisters.
The question is, am I comfortable calling it a suicide mission? I'm comfortable calling it a suicide with the bombing that occurred immediately thereafter. I'm not giving it any other labels.
Alcides and his girlfriend Anna returned from New Year's Eve celebrations to the Cybertruck on fire, capturing this video.
We actually thought that it was a scene of a film. There were a couple of elderlies here. Her leg was injured, was some flesh. And also her husband, he was wearing a coat, which when it exploded, all the pieces were on his coat.
My spouse was out front smoking a cigarette when everything went off. He was a few feet away from the Cybertruck as it pulled in.
What did you see, sir?
I seen the car explode with the fireworks. So it was crazy. It was scary.
I was inside, and there was no notification inside. Evidently, the fire alarms only worked on the first floor. So you got about 50 more stories that had zero information. I woke up to see on the news that the Trump Tower was bellowing smoke out of the bottom of it. I looked out my window and saw smoke everywhere.
The charred shell of the car has been removed from the hotel, now reopened to tourists. The potential symbolism was inescapable. A car manufactured by Elon Musk, appointed to Donald Trump's new cabinet, ablaze outside the hotel of the man who'll be president again in a few weeks. Repairs already underway to fix the awning as investigators tried to establish a motive. So far, the FBI have found no definitive link between the attack in New Orleans and this car bomb. Investigators have been looking at the possibility of a military link between the two men. Both were stationed at the same time at a base in North Carolina and possibly on tour in Afghanistan too. That could, though, just be coincidence. It could be happenstance too that both vehicles were hired from the same rental company. Many questions still to be answered.
And Martha is live in Las Vegas for us now. And Martha, as you say, many questions yet to be answered. Police saying they can't definitively rule out any links because of the extreme coincidences between the two events.
Yeah, there certainly are coincidences that are unavoidable. Police at the moment saying they've not been able to find any definitive link between the two incidents, what happened here and what happened in New Orleans. But they do point out that this investigation is still in its infancy. Interestingly, this could have been so much worse. It seems like the distinctive shell, the outer shell of that Tesla Cybertruck has contained the explosions somewhat, meaning that only 7 people in the surrounding area suffered minor injuries. Of course, the driver, Matthew Leibelsberger, losing his life. One of the investigative agents said the level of sophistication of the explosive is not what he would have expected from an individual with this type of military experience. Matthew Leibelsberger was an Army Master Sergeant, very high up in his division. Police have also been able to trace how this vehicle moved after it was rented in Colorado by looking at the electric vehicle charging stations. So it travelled through New Mexico, Arizona before coming into Nevada and here in Las Vegas. Police have been able to ascertain that Matthew Leibelsberger was the only person inside that vehicle. Sky News has also learned that Leibelsberger recently became the father to a newborn daughter back in summer of last year. So really no indication now as to why he did what he did, what brought him here, and whether he intended to do damage only to himself or to people in the surrounding area.
Martha, live from Las Vegas tonight. Thank you. In the UK, the Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, has called for a national inquiry into what she called the UK's rape gang scandal. That's after Elon Musk criticised Keir Starmer over the issue and a government minister rejected calls for an investigation. Let's bring in our political correspondent, Amanda Acas, who's at Westminster for us tonight. Amanda, look, this is a controversial and emotive subject, but Kemi Badenoch herself also being criticised for not doing anything about it for the last 14 years.
Yes, this has broken out into a rather extraordinary political row today. It all began after it emerged that Jess Phillips, the Labour safeguarding minister, had written a letter rejecting calls from Oldham Council for the government to set up a public inquiry into child sexual exploitation cases in Oldham. She argued that it would be better for that kind of inquiry to be commissioned locally, for it to have more legitimacy, as has happened in cases in Rotherham and Telford. Now, that decision prompted quite quite an angry reaction from some Conservative MPs and also from Reform UK, which has previously campaigned on the issue of cases where young girls were groomed by predominantly British Pakistani men. And overnight, the whole thing was whipped up by Elon Musk, who loves to have a pop at the Labour government, with a series of quite inflammatory posts suggesting that Jess Phillips should be in jail and criticising Sir Keir Starmer for his role as Director of Public Prosecutions at the time that many of these cases happened. It's important to say that in that role he actually instigated legal action against the Rochdale gang, for example. But then this morning, Kemi Badenoch decided to get involved. I'll read you the tweet she posted. "The time is long overdue for a full national inquiry into the rape gang scandal. Trials have taken place all over the country in recent years, but no one in authority has joined the dots. 2025 must be the year that victims start to get justice." Now, the risk of this position for her is that it does rather look like she's sort of scrambling after Elon Musk and Nigel Farage, who himself criticised her, saying the Conservatives were in power for 14 years, you didn't set up an inquiry of this kind. And also it emerged that just 2 years ago, the Tory safeguarding minister rejected a similar request for an inquiry from Oldham Council back then. So all of it pretty messy and unedifying, particularly given that the one national public inquiry there has been that looked into aspects of this, the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, made 20 recommendations 2 years ago. None of them have been implemented yet. Labour say they fully support that work and they're working urgently to do so.
Amanda, live from Westminster. Thank you. Now, suspected members of gangs coordinating people smuggling across the Channel could face travel bans and social media blackouts under new government plans. It comes a day after it was confirmed that crossings by illegal migrants rose by a quarter last year. Our Home editor, Jason Farrell, reports.
The number able and willing to risk the crossing is rising, up a quarter last year. And so the political pressure ramps up on the government. Hammer, an Iraqi Kurd, is one of thousands who's crossed the Channel on small boats in the last few years. He doesn't want to be identified, but says he was willing to risk everything to make the journey.
My life was at risk in Iraq, and I had no other choice. The smugglers were frightening and treated us poorly. I had no idea where I would end up.
Were you fearful leaving your fate to smugglers? It's quite a dangerous thing to do.
The journey was extremely frightening. The crossing of the Channel was terrifying, and the boat had holes in it.
The government's promised to break up the people smuggling gangs, and the introduction of interim serious crime protection orders gives the police extra powers. They can include imposing travel restrictions, a ban on using social media, a ban on laptop or mobile phone use, and they can be used while investigations are still taking place. Hence, it's considered a swift way to disrupt activity.
They will enable law enforcement agencies to act much more quickly to stop serious organised immigration crime, and do so by making sure that we can prevent those who are undertaking such crime from, for example, destroying evidence or changing their tactics.
But the opposition points to the number of arrivals rising since the end of their proposed Rwanda scheme, which they claim was already acting as a deterrent.
The measures announced today are frankly rather laughable. The idea that dangerous people smuggling gangs are going to be deterred by the threat of some sort of mobile phone banning order is pretty laughable, frankly. These measures are not going to make a difference.
Refugee organisations say the only effective solution is creating safer routes. Hammer doesn't think the gangs will be deterred. And it seems there's no shortage of people still willing to take their chances. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
Now, new weather warnings for ice have been issued for parts of the UK ahead of a 3-day snow alert for this weekend. The warning for ice is in place until 10 a.m. on Friday and covers northwest England, parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. A second warning for snow and ice is also in place and covers northeast Scotland. Well, while many will be braced for a cold snap, thousands of others have been assessing the damage caused by heavy flooding, which hit parts of northwest England yesterday. A major incident was declared in Greater Manchester, where months' worth of rain fell in just 2 days, leaving some trapped in their homes while others were forced to leave. Our North of England correspondent Caterina Vitozzi reports.
After the floods comes the sludge. Thick and stinking. This is inches deep, this muck.
Yeah, it is, and you don't even know what's in it either. So there's an environmental side. The clean-up is going to take a long time.
The small businesses on this estate in Stockport did get advance flood warning after heavy rain. But the landlord says nothing could prepare them for this.
We're just so shocked. We were working on data from the Environment Agency that said that this would not happen until potentially 2040, 2050. We want answers. How has this happened? People are going to lose their livelihoods.
The Environment Agency told us it's been working around the clock to reduce the impact of the flooding, which here reached over 5 foot, devastating people only just back on their feet after flooding 2 years ago.
I feel numb, like, I don't know. I don't know what to do for the best. Because I lost £30,000 of stock the last time it happened. And this time, I can't even assess the damage because it's worse than it was last time. It just looks like it's a car crash at the minute, so.
The clean-up has just started. It's going to take days. This company only moved in just before the new year, and this is now what they're having to do. And because of the proximity to the river, none of the buildings in this estate have any flood insurance. Across Greater Manchester, people are now counting the cost of a month's worth of rain in 48 hours. 1,000 people have been evacuated from their flats and houses. Others have had cars flooded. For Chad Meadows in Wigan, well, his home is simply unlivable.
Oh, my God. It's soul destroying. Most of my son's possessions are lost. His Christmas presents are unusable now. Clothes that are unwearable. But we spent a good chunk of our savings on making it a really good home. And it just feels like it's all down the drain.
The major incident declared in Greater Manchester is now in recovery phase, trying to restore power and water to get people home. But most still have no idea when that will be. Katerina Vitozzi, Sky News in Stockport.
A man has died after being hurt when a car hit pedestrians on Shaftesbury Avenue in central London on Christmas Day. Aidan Chapman, who is 25, was one of 4 people hit in the incident. A 30-year-old man, Anthony Gilheeney, appeared in court last week, charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. Rapper Stormzy's been banned from driving for 9 months after pleading guilty to using a phone while driving in London in March last year. He's also pleaded guilty to driving a Lamborghini with excessively tinted windows, which were only letting in 4% of light when the legal limit is 70%. And investigators in South Korea are at the residence of the suspended President Yoon as they execute an arrest warrant over his attempt to impose martial law. The warrant came after Yoon, who is being investigated for abusing his power and inciting an insurrection, ignored 3 summonses to appear for questioning over the past 2 weeks. Now, this time last year, the sporting world had just been introduced to the talents of the rising young star of the darts world, Luke the Nuke Littler. A year on, he's gone from unknown to the bookies' favourite to win. Our correspondent, Shaman Freeman-Powell, is at Alexandra Palace in North London tonight, soaking up the atmosphere around the semi-final, Shaman. And it's been quite a run for Luke Littler and quite a run for the darts world and Brits' love of darts.
Absolutely, there has been quite an atmosphere to soak up. The crowd tonight have been relentless. They've brought bags of energy tonight for the semi-finals here at Alexandra Palace. Now, currently, Luke Littler is 4 up against Stephen Bunting, but it's all to play for. Earlier in the night, we had Michael Van Gerwen facing Chris Dobie. Now, the crowd seemed to erupt when Dobie came out, seemingly supporting him, but it was the experience of Michael van Gerwen, which shone through, meaning he's now going to be at the finals tomorrow for the 7th time. But who he will be facing is still up for grabs, essentially. Luke Littler is the fans' favourite. Just last year, he was just 16 years old, making it to the final, the youngest player to make it to the 3rd round of the championships. And even though he didn't win, he lost to his namesake Luke Humphries. He still won the hearts of thousands, if not millions of people around the world. I was talking to fans earlier on, and so many of them said they came here tonight, some of them for the first time, to support Luke Littler, and because of how proud they are of his story. This is a 17-year-old now, but just 16 when he made it to the finals last year. He had missed exams to pursue his dreams in the darts world, and it had paid off. He's now at the semi-finals again for the 2nd time, hoping to make it to the finals tomorrow, and we should know in the next half an hour or so whether or not that's happened.
Siobhan, live from Alexandra Palace, thank you. And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the Observer's chief leader writer, Sonia Soda, and the Times columnist and leader writer, Sebastian Payne. Now, among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Telegraph. Its headline, Labour blocks grooming gang probe. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
tonight on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Observer's chief leader writer, Sonia Soda, and the Times columnist and leader writer, Sebastian Payne. So let's see what's on some of the front pages for you. We'll start with The Express, which carries the Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch's criticism of the government for declining to hold a public inquiry into historical child grooming gangs. The Telegraph has the same story on its front, but also highlights Meghan Markle's upcoming Netflix cooking show. The Mail says the salaries for NHS have soared by more than £1.1 billion despite failing to hit performance targets on waiting lists. The Guardian reports on ministers launching an independent commission to reform adult social care. The Times also leads with that story, adding that Labour has delayed the planned overhaul of social care until 2028, so the Commission can build a national consensus. The Eye hears that millions of householders across Britain will be made to pay for the installation of heat pumps in the push towards net zero emissions. According to the Financial Times, the slow growth of the economy is likely to mean the government will be forced to introduce tax increases before the next election. And according to the Mirror, the Royal British Legion is actively seeking the participation of the last few remaining veterans from VE Day and VJ Day for the 80th anniversary commemorations this year. And the Star hears that travel agencies are currently accepting 2 holiday bookings every second as people look to get away from the grim winter weather. Not surprisingly. And a reminder that by scanning the QR codes you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages for yourself of tomorrow's papers while you watch with us. And we're joined tonight by Sonia Soda and Sebastian Payne. Good evening to you. OK, so let's start with the Telegraph. The front page they're carrying is about Labour declining to hold a public inquiry into grooming gangs. Kemi Badenoch obviously coming out criticising that. Sonia, let's start with you on your opinion of this. It's interesting, though, because Kemi Badenoch herself has also been criticised because the Conservative Party didn't look into it either.
Yeah, and I think it's really sad, actually, the way that this very important issue has become a bit of a political football. So I've written a lot about, well, first of all, the grooming gangs, but all different kinds of child sexual exploitation and child sexual abuse that happens in the UK. We did have a big national inquiry, a statutory inquiry that took place over a number of years. It was chaired by Alexis Jay, a really reputable child protection expert, and it came up, you know, after years of work, 15 different separate investigations, it came up with a number of recommendations in 2022. One of the aspects that it looked at was child sexual abuse by organised networks, i.e. grooming gangs, in towns and cities across the UK. And we know an awful lot about this now, about how it's happened, about how it's taken place, about who's been perpetrating it, about the lack of action by police and authorities. I mean, it's absolutely heinous when you look both at the crimes that took place and the failure to listen to children, predominantly girls, working class girls in many of these areas who this was happening to. And, you know, there were so many people kind of complicit in it and, you know, in not uncovering the scale of these crimes. And the independent inquiry came out with a number of recommendations on how we need to transform the way that we look at child sexual exploitation and child sexual abuse here in the UK. Really important recommendations that actually came out, you know, to be fair, under the last Conservative government. And there has been far too slow progress in implementing these recommendations. Now, it's certainly true to say that if you look at what lots of the independent inquiries into grooming gangs in different areas like Rotherham and Rochdale, at the time, the race of some of the perpetrators was a factor in this not getting uncovered more quickly. But it's only one factor. Another factor was the fact that the police just saw these, you know, girls as young as 12 as complicit in their own sexual abuse. You know, they saw them as sort of, they would a sexually active adult rather than children who are being sexually exploited and abused. So there were lots of different factors. But even though we know that there were cultural sensitivities, I think what we've seen is a pendulum swing too far in the other direction, where, you know, people are raising this now and using it as a political football, not because they are interested primarily in how we prevent child sexual abuse wherever we find it in society. It's a lot more common than we think, and it's not just grooming gangs, it happens in institutions, in sports clubs, in homes, behind closed doors. And, you know, you know, the implication seems to be that some forms of child sexual abuse are worse than others. And actually, we had an inquiry on all aspects of child sexual abuse in this country, and the conclusion was we are not good enough at it. We are not good enough at preventing it. We are not good enough at acting on it. And these actions need to be taken, and no one is acting on it.
And Sebastian, look, the Times also carrying it on page 6 and 7. They're saying that Badenoch calls for grooming gangs cover-up inquiry. What do you make of it?
Well, we should just note briefly why we're talking about this right now, because, as Sonia said, this has been reported for quite some time. Despite a lot of stuff online, this has been covered in depth by the so-called mainstream media, and it was Andrew Norfolk at my paper, The Times, who was one of the first people to reveal what was happening in Rotherham. And Sonia, I know you've written on this as well, in The Observer as well. So this idea there's some kind of media cover-up is complete nonsense. That's the first thing. This all really began with Elon Musk and his element in all this. I think is on the Telegraph as well, because there were some people debating online about grooming gangs and whether there was some kind of cover-up, and Donald Trump's right-hand man amplified this for reasons that we have no idea why, having never said much interest in this before, and has spent most of today tweeting about grooming gangs and about Tommy Robinson, who, of course, is in prison for several contempt of court, and saying that he should be freed. I'm not saying Elon Musk doesn't have the slightest clue what he's talking about, but he just seems to be wading into commentary on this very sensitive area that there have been what I would describe as institutional failings on a systemic and very wide level across society. Now, coming back to where we're at in terms of British politics here, obviously...
Because he was very critical of Keir Starmer's approach, right?
He's been very critical of Keir Starmer's approach, and this is what comes to what the Conservative Party's been saying today. So the Conservatives have written to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, asking whether there should be an inquiry into whether the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, of course led by one Keir Starmer when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, whether it was ignored or even covered up reports of child sexual exploitation. I'm actually a bit sceptical of the idea of having another inquiry because, A, we had that massive child sexual abuse inquiry that went on for a long, long time. Oldham Council, which I think requested this inquiry, has also had its own inquiry. And there is a slight danger these things become a boondoggle for lawyers that will go on for 10 years and we'll just have a lot of interviews of stuff we already know out there. What I think matters is, number one, the institutions that failed, and are they getting fixed? And number two, are there prosecutions of perpetrators that could be happening quicker? That's what I think matters more. But ultimately, the thing that's really put this on the front page today is this letter that was revealed, I think, by GB News, that said that Jess Phillips, who is the Safeguarding Minister, has rejected this inquiry. The Conservatives are calling from it, and this is going to rumble on. But I think the last thing I would just say is this is a sign of politics in 2025, that we've got Donald Trump is coming to the White House in less than a month. Elon Musk is only going to get more powerful until he eventually falls out with Donald Trump.
An Elon Musk tweet
And here
has
we are,
prompted
and
a
it's now on
debate
several
here
front
in the
pages.
UK.
You've got two party leaders, Nigel Farage has been all over this as well, all dancing to Elon Musk's tune. And this won't be the last time it happens. It's going to go across many different things, but I think particularly on this issue, you've got to be very careful. It's not helpful,
really,
exactly.
ultimately, as I think we can all agree, it's the victims that need the attention and the implementation.
And it's you know, it's sort of strange that there's this row in some ways that's erupted over Oldham. There was an independent review into Oldham just 2 years ago. It made really important findings, including, you know, uncovering masses of failings by Greater Manchester Police, where they weren't making, for example, council officials aware of the fact that there were, you know, there were men with very, very serious allegations against them, you know, then working with Oldham Council and in a position, you know, in relation to Oldham Council where they could, you know, potentially perpetrate further crimes. So there were huge institutional failings in Oldham, but we had a report just 2 years ago that looked into them. You know, quite a similar sort of report that we had into Rotherham, that we had into Rochdale. Then we had the National Independent Inquiry that looked at all the reviews that had been done and drew on the evidence from there to come up with some national level recommendations. So it's hard not to see this as a bit kind of, you know, there's a report there. There are really important findings. Let's act on them rather than calling for another review.
It's about action and implementation, isn't it?
Absolutely.
OK, let's move on now to The Guardian, page 1. And it's talking about the huge raft of measures for adult social care needed for decades. I think we can all agree. We've covered it so many times. And it says that the Health Secretary says that by 2050, there'll be 4 million more people over the age of 65 in England than there are right now. And if we do nothing, real social care costs are expected to nearly double by 2038 compared to 2018 numbers, Sebastian. It's very much something that's needed. There's a lot of reviews and reform that's needed.
Yes, that's absolutely the case. And if you've seen this headline, then you might have read it about 15 times before, because we've had so many reviews and commissions and inquiries and listing processes about social care. And this is, I mean, if I had to say, it's slightly a problem of this government that obviously Keir Starmer came in July, and a lot of the biggest stuff, be it defence spending, be it social care, has all been kicked into independent commissions. Now, the one good thing about this is that this latest commission is being led by Dame Louise Casey, who is the go-to fixer for problems across public policy in the UK. She's one of the smartest and most interesting people, and I think Baroness Casey will do a brilliant job. The only bad sign is this is going to come in 2028, which is probably just around the time we'll be starting to think about the next general election. And those statistics you mentioned, which is quoting Wes Streeting in The Guardian tomorrow, are very true. But the problem with social care is the Do Not review, which is the first time that looked at a proposal for this, is about 10 years old now, and we really do know the broad outlines of what needs to happen here. And the fact is that everyone's just dancing around because it's really, really difficult politically. But I just do hope that actually, that, you know, Louise Casey's talking about a cross-party consensus here. I think that's going to be really tough. You know, Theresa May tried to do this in the 2017 election. She shied away from it. Boris Johnson tried to do it in 2019. He shied away with it. And are you telling me that Keir Starmer is going to have a 4-year commission to come up with a controversial plan to fix social care, to implement for an election? It's not going to happen. It will go in the manifesto, and we'll have another 5 years delayed.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there on this particular subject. We're going to have to take a break. And coming up after the break, could the slow growth of the economy mean tax increases are inevitable? We'll discuss that next.
Migrants risk their lives climbing aboard these trains in search of a dream, the United States.
It's really dangerous. They often get robbed on this train.
They suffer a lot by police, cartels.
What happens to them next, we just don't know. Do you miss your mum?
With Trump coming to the presidency, how much longer will people be accommodated?
The journey you've been through, it's been very difficult at times. Has it been worth it?
See.
This is a journey which goes by one name, the Beast.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
I've witnessed migration across Europe close up.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Free, wherever you get your news.
I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Seagal?
I'm Conor Gillis, Sky's Scotland correspondent. Sky News, the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave.
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people.
Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Welcome back, and we have some breaking news to bring you. And Luke the Nuke Littler has won the semi-final of the darts championship. Let's take a look. And that is the moment that he won the semi-final against Stephen Bunting. 6-1, I believe, and now he's through to the final of the World Darts Championship, where he's going to face Dutchman Michael van Gerwen, who's on his fourth World Championship, or chasing his fourth World Championship title. Second year in a row, of course, for Luke Littler. He was 16 last year, 17 this year. A huge fan favourite, and certainly has brought darts back on the agenda for a lot of Brits as well. There we go, there's a nice hug between the two Brits. Of course, Stephen Bunting representing England as well. Finals tomorrow night, I think, at Alexandra Palace. Welcome back again. You are watching the press preview. With me now, Sonia Soda and Sebastian Payne to take us through all the front pages. Let's turn our attention to the FT, and on the front, their headline, insipid growth means tax rise is almost inevitable. So growth is going to return to the UK. Not strong enough, though, to avoid tax rises, which, of course, Labour keeps saying they're not going to do, but
yeah, so this is a survey that the FT have done of 96 economists in the UK, and I don't think it's going to be too much of a surprise, actually, that the economists they've polled, yes, they think that there is going to be more growth this year, but not enough to stave off the need for tax rises. And to be honest, we've heard lots of economists warning about this, including Paul Johnson, who's director of the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies. The issue is that Labour really do face a bit of a crunch, which is that the country's fiscal finances are not in a good state. That is in very large part down to the inheritance that they got from the last government. The only way to sort that out is to get growth so that you don't have to put taxes up, so that you've got more money flowing into the Treasury as a result of the tax revenues that you get as a result of more growth. But the issue is that growth going to come? And lots of people are quite sceptical, including the OBR, it has to be said, about whether over the medium term Rachel Reeves is going to see the growth that she needs in order to avoid some really tough spending choices around public services in the last 3 years of this Parliament. So there are lots of economists who think that unless she gets really lucky, she may well have to come back and ask for more money, ask for more taxes.
Okay. I'm going to have to... I want to move on, Sebastian, if that's OK.
If you wish. I think this is more interesting than the other one, but it's up to you.
OK, go on then, if
Very
you can
quickly.
be quick. We've got about a minute or so.
Right,
Let's
1 minute
move
quick.
both in.
As always, I agree with Sonia. I think that the fact is that Rachel Reeves went into the election ruling out tax rises on VAT, income tax or national insurance. From Labour's perspective, that was a huge mistake, because it means that all the tax rises have gone on the increase in employers' national insurance. And there's an economist here from Warwick University who said that there's a dawning realisation that without income tax or VAT rises, we cannot make the damn sums work. And so I think Rachel Reeves did say at one point last year she wasn't going to do more tax rises. That was kind of cancelled. And this tells you what everyone knows, is that she is going to have to raise taxes again at some point. And even though they've just done this very painful tax-raising budget, there's going to have to be another one. But it just shows how dicey all the economic figures are going to be. But as you said, it's not a surprise, but it's quite stark to see it in pink and white, pink and black, I should say.
Oh, so much to discuss. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there for now. Sebastian Payne, Sonia Soda, thanks very much indeed. You're back in the next hour, of course. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, we will have the latest for you as more details emerge about the New Orleans attack suspect. We'll bring you those and the latest pictures and, of course, more on that attack in Las Vegas. Stay tuned to Sky News.